Okay, so it looks like most people are in the room, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to the webinar, and here we go.
Hello, my name is Michael Maloney, and I'm the CEO of the American Institute of Physics. Thank you for joining us today for the webinar entitled, If You Lead, Will They Follow? Leadership Skills, a Critical Tool for Career Success. The webinar is sponsored by the American Institute of Physics, Physics Today, American Association of Physicists in Medicine, American Association of Physics Teachers, and the Society of Physics Students in Sigma Pi Sigma. Lisa Balves from Balves Consulting is our speaker. Lisa has over 25 years of experience as an independent consultant and has written for multiple industry publications, including Science magazine. The presentation will be followed by a brief question and answer period at the end. But without any further ado, I want to welcome the presenter, Lisa Balves.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. And welcome to all of you to the webinar. Thank you also to the 4 organizations that sponsored this webinar for inviting me to talk to you for a little bit this afternoon about leadership. We'll start with a few housekeeping notes. Please remember that as participants, y'all are in listen-only mode, so we will not be able to hear anything that you say. If you have questions, please submit them through the question and answer panel, which you can open by clicking on the control bar in your Zoom panel. If you need the closed captions or want those, you can click the CC icon at the bottom of your Zoom window to turn those on or off. If you have technical difficulties, please use the chat feature. So we're going to save the chat for technical difficulties, not for questions about the subject matter. So if you have technical difficulties, use the chat feature and Vanessa will take care of you very quickly. Today's webinar is being recorded, so you will receive a link to that recording afterwards, so you can watch it over and over again to your heart's content. So thank you for being here this afternoon, and let's move ahead to our content. Okay, so the agenda for the presentation, we're going to start by talking about what is leadership, defining it, talking about the difference between leadership and other things. We'll talk a little bit about different leadership styles and when you might want to use the different styles. We'll also talk about the different pieces of leadership. Leadership is a big topic, but there's lots of different things that feed into that. So we'll talk about all the different, not all the different, but a lot of the different pieces that can fit into leadership, how you might have had experience with those. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit about how you can get experience with leadership if this is something that you need for your career, something that you think you would like or would enjoy doing. And at the end, we should have plenty of time for questions. So as I said, if you think of questions as we go along, please do put those in the question and answer box, and we will get to those at the end of the workshop. Okay, so let's start by defining leadership. It's one of those things that everybody, thinks they know what it is, but it's sometimes hard to define. So one of my favorite ways to define it is, I really like this quote that says, if you want to build a ship, don't drum up people to collect wood or assign them tasks and work. Rather, teach them to yearn for the endless immensity of the sea. And that's really what leadership is. It's having that big vision. What is the end goal? What is the big purpose that we're trying to serve here? And getting the other people excited about wanting to work with you to achieve that big goal. It's learning how to motivate other people and get them excited about what it is that you want to happen. So leadership is really teaching them to yearn for that endless immensity of the sea. Okay. Leadership is often confused with management. And these are really two different things, sort of a continuum. So leadership is that long-term success, that big vision, motivating other people to want to work on it. Management is more organization, more of the day-to-day details, making sure that things are implemented, that things happen according to the timeline, managing budgets, things like that, managing more of the details. So there really is a difference, and some people are better at one and some people are better at the other. So when you're thinking back over your career, thinking about where you may want to go, think about, okay, is it leadership that I want and am good at and I'm excited about doing, or is management where my strengths lie? Excuse me. Okay. You also want to think about the title of leader. So just being assigned the leader of a group does not necessarily mean that the other people on the team are going to look to you as the leader. So just having a title doesn't necessarily make you a leader. People may start looking at you initially that way, but it may not continue if you don't take on the role of leadership and fill that for them. And conversely, not having a title doesn't mean you're not the leader. There are many, many people who they call it leading without authority. So you may be the person that everyone turns to and looks to for guidance and direction, even though that's not the title. You're not the person that they're officially supposed to look to. So you want to, think about this as well. Hey, have I been assigned leadership in the past? Have I taken leadership? And how did that work out for me? So think about the projects that you're working on. Who has the title of leader and who actually is fulfilling the role of leader? And are those the same person, or are they different? Who do people turn to when they have questions? Okay. I mentioned earlier that this is something, as you go further along in your career, you're probably more likely to be assigned leadership or be asked about taking leadership. And this is something that you don't want to take on lightly. You really want to think about, do I want to be a leader, or, am I happier being a manager? Is that where my strengths lie? There's a wonderful study where they looked at leadership among companies, and they developed something called the Peter Principle. And basically the theory was that people are promoted to their level of incompetence. So as people are able to do their job, they get promoted to the next level. If they do that well, they get promoted again, and then they keep going until they get to a job that they can't do, and that's where they stay. It's a little bit humorous, but sadly, it's also a little bit true. So the last thing you want is to get promoted into a leadership position only to find out that you can't do it, or that you can do it, but you don't enjoy it. So planning ahead of time, getting some experience, finding out if this is something that you like is going to prevent you from being promoted to that level of incompetence. It lets you try it out and see if you like it. Okay. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the different styles that you could use for leadership. There's all kinds of different styles out there. These are some of the most common, some of the ones that people have probably heard of. Different people like different ones better, and different ones are better for different situations. So different times you have to lead people in a different way. So again, you want to think about which of these is appropriate for the situation that you're in, for the types of people that you're working with, for the particular vision or goal you're trying to accomplish. So probably the easiest one to understand is authoritative. And you can think of this as kind of the dictator. So this is a single decision maker, and they just say, they make all the decisions, usually without asking for input. You do this, you do that, the end. I'm making all the decisions. This is, to some degree, easier for the leader because they don't have to take anybody else's input. They just do what they think is right. Doesn't always go over well with the people who are following. But it's sometimes necessary. And probably the best example is, in case of emergencies. If your lab is on fire, you don't want somebody saying, well, what do you think we should do? You want somebody to really take leadership and say, you call 911, you get everybody out of the building, you do something else. So there are times when the authoritative leadership style is really necessary and is really the best. Okay. There are other times where other styles work better. So there's a democratic style of leadership. So this is much more shared. The decision making is more distributed among the members of the group. And it's really where everyone is more interested in the best interest of the group, even above the particular task or goal that they're trying to get done. So this is normally used for something like a small group that's only going to be around for a short period of time. Maybe you've decided to put together a study group for a class you're taking. So maybe you're doing kind of the organizing, but you're getting feedback from everybody and taking votes on, okay, what night should we meet? What time should we meet? And then doing what's best for the group overall, doing what's best for the majority of the group. So this usually makes everybody feel very included. It's very democratic. It's not the most efficient way of doing things, but depending on your goal, this could be an appropriate leadership style. Okay. Kind of a related leadership style is what you would call laissez-faire. So this is even more relaxed, even more laid back. This is where there is usually a designated leader, but they really let the other people make decisions. They let the subordinates make decisions. And more importantly, the subordinates are actually empowered to implement those decisions. So they don't have to go run everything by the leader. They can decide what they think is best and then go do it. So an example of a time when you might do this is, suppose you're going to start a journal club for your research group. So you may be the one making the decisions about, when they're going to meet, who's going to read what articles in what order, how the presentations are going to be done. But you're really, given the freedom to do that under the guidance of somebody else. Okay. Another one that you may be familiar with is the paternalistic leadership model. So this is where the leader is definitely seen as being above the followers, kind of at a different level, knows more than the followers. The leader gives advice not only on professional issues related to the project and what you're trying to do, but may also give advice on personal and other issues. You can think of it as sort of a father knows best approach. They give advice and direction on all kinds of different things, and they're usually not questioned. They say this is how it should be done, and the followers most of the time kind of go along and do it. So a lot of research groups are run this way. The final model, leadership model that you might think about using is called servant leadership. And this one has actually been around for a long time. It actually was first identified back in the 1970s, but it's getting a little bit more attention now. And in the servant leadership model, the goal of the leader is to serve the group. So the leader really looks at themselves as working in service of the bigger vision, working to empower and to help the followers to accomplish this major goal. They look to help develop the skills of the followers and really make this big goal happen, and that's the most important thing. In the servant leadership model, the people are the first priority, and getting them developed and getting them excited and working on the project together. The big idea is second, and accomplishing tasks is really the third priority. Servant leaders often also lead by example, so they're usually out there working right along with everyone else, and a lot of times came up through the ranks, so they have a lot of credibility in that, oh, well, they're asking me to do something, but they're doing it, or they're doing the same thing, or they've actually done this in the past, so if they're asking me to do it, they must know what they're talking about. Okay. All right, so those are kind of 5 different styles that may be appropriate for different times. There's also the question of not just what style you're going to take on as the leader, but who you're going to lead, how you're going to assemble your team. So sometimes you inherit a team and that's who you're going to work with. Other times you get to pick who you're going to work with. So if you have the luxury of recruiting people for your team, I mean, that's great. You can start by looking at people who have the skills that you need, people who may have already expressed an interest in this. and you're going to have to convince them to be on your team and to be part of your project. And this is, part of leadership, is getting all these people together and getting them to agree to do what needs to be done. So you're going to select them by talent. One of the, I don't want to call it tricks, but one of the ways to be successful in recruiting people to your team is to get to know them and to know what is important to them and what they value, and then appeal to that aspect of them. So for example, I for a long time wanted to do a chemistry merit badge clinic, and I was recruiting people to help work on it. And I found I had two distinct populations. So the people who were scout leaders, who were interested in, having their youth learn something and earn a merit badge, I would say, yeah, don't you want your scouts to be able, to earn this merit badge? So won't you come, help put this on? And they would say, oh, okay, yeah, I'll do it so my scouts can do it. I had a whole nother group of volunteers who were chemists who knew nothing about scouting. And I would go to them and say, don't you want to share all this cool chemistry with teenagers? Don't you want to come share what you know and get them excited about chemistry? So by appealing to different things in different people, you can still get them excited about this bigger vision that you're putting on together. And then it becomes very interesting to see how they all work together when they're doing it for different reasons. Hopefully it doesn't lead to too many conflicts with priorities, but that then becomes something that you have to manage, as the leader of the group. So you assemble your team, you get all these people together. One of the things that you want to keep in mind and that we're hearing a lot about lately is that you want to lead inclusively. So that means your team should be as diverse as possible. As I said, you get people with wildly different backgrounds. They have different experiences, different ways of doing things, which is great because you can take advantage of all of those and pick the best one for your particular situation. When you're thinking about leading inclusively, you want to make sure that those people are not just nominally on the team, but make sure that everybody has not only a seat at the table, but also has a voice in the discussion, and they feel welcome to share whatever their opinions are. So some of the things that you can do as the leader that are good practices for leading inclusively are just good general practices overall. For example, sending an agenda out before a meeting so people know what you're going to talk about. They have time to do the research. They have time to think about it, because some people, have to think about things a little bit before they're ready to talk on them. Letting people know that you're willing to take comments and still have discussions, after the meeting. Because again, some people will hear things in the discussion at the meeting, and then it will take them a while. They'll have to, kind of think about it for a while, and then, oh yeah, okay, well now I have this comment. So by taking all those different learning and action styles into account, you make it better for everyone. You get much better input. Use your network as much as possible to find people to be on your teams and expand your network. Ask people, I need people to help do this. Do you know anybody who might be willing to work on this team? And I'm especially looking for people with this kind of expertise or this kind of experience. So don't be afraid to ask for help in getting all kinds of people on your team. And then once you've got them together, okay, it's going to take a little while before they gel as a team. So there are well-defined sort of stages of team development. So forming is that very beginning where you're gathering all the people together. You're kind of learning a little bit about each other, about people's backgrounds, people's expertise, people's expectations of what they're going to do. The next step that teams normally go to, there's usually a little bit of a storming phase where you get into hopefully not really strong conflict, but maybe misunderstandings where people's roles are overlapping. Different people thought they were going to be doing the same thing. So you're trying to kind of shake out those roles and responsibilities and figure out exactly what the big picture is, figuring out who's going to do what. As those problems get worked out, you move into the norming phase where you're like, okay, we know what we're doing. This is good. things are okay. If you have a really good team and a good leader, you will get to the performing stage where everybody is happy, everybody knows what they're doing, everything is getting done, moving forward. The team members can rely on each other, they have personal connections. Things really move along wonderfully, and you get to your goal. And then the other part that you need to think about is what happens at the end? What happens when we reach our goal? Do we take this team and transform them and assign them a different task or come up with a different vision that they can implement? Or do they just end and everybody goes their separate ways, and you want to have, some kind of an ending activity or event to kind of give closure to the team and celebrate your accomplishments before you all move on to the next thing. Okay, so teams generally go through these stages. They don't spend the same amount of time. Sometimes they'll, go do the stages out of order. But if you don't want to get too upset when they seem to be disagreeing, because that's, a normal thing that people have to do in order to move forward and learn how to work together. And as a matter of fact, it's actually at that storming or troubled group phase that they really need the most help from the leader. That's when you've got everybody's looking in different directions. They're going all over the place. Nobody knows what's going on. And you really need the leader to kind of pull everybody together and say, look, this is our goal. This is the big vision. This is what we're trying to do. Let's, figure out how we can all move in the same direction. So that's really when they need you the most, is when things look the most disorganized. And a lot of times this is when companies and organizations will bring in somebody from the outside to be a leader, because this is somebody who maybe doesn't have that history with the team, so they can come in with a fresh perspective, and they don't bring any of that baggage. So a lot of times people will be brought in to help solve a troubled group, and then get everybody moving in the same direction. And then when things are moving smoothly, that leader gets bored and moves on, and somebody else comes in. Okay. All right. So we've talked about the getting your team together, how you're going to work with them, the different stages they're going to go through. Let's now turn and talk about the different pieces of the leadership puzzle. So the different, tasks, the different skills that you might have to exhibit as the leader of this group. Okay, so there's lots of smaller pieces to leadership, lots of smaller skills that combine to form leadership. Some of these things you may have done, some of these things you haven't. You can get experience with them. Okay, some of them you're going to be better at than others, but these are all things that you can think about to use in your career. Okay, so the first one is balance. Part of the leader's job is to make sure the team is working on the right things and to make sure that the team is focused where they should be. So in some cases, the most important thing is getting the task done. In other cases, the most important thing is keeping the team together and developing a relationships between the members of the team, so this team can hang together for a while and go on to do lots of things. So it's the leader's job to think about what is the long-term plan for this team and what is more important right now. Is it more important that I get them focused on the tasks and it doesn't matter if they don't like each other? Or do we really need to take some time, do some team building, get everybody to like each other, and then we can worry about the specific tasks and the specific goal later. So managing that balance is part of the job of the leader. Okay. I mentioned team building, relationships. This is a big part of the leader's job, is getting to know the team, getting to know what each person, what they want to do, what their values are, what their skills are, making sure that they're feeling appreciated both by you and by the other members of the team, making sure that the members of the team are getting along with each other and developing relationships with each other so they can rely on each other. It's much better to develop these things ahead of time rather than wait until you have a problem and then you have people who don't know each other trying to solve a problem. So building up the team relationships is a really important part of the leader's job. And part of that building relationships is resolving conflicts. When team members don't see eye to eye on how something should be done or on what's most important, when they're competing with each other, maybe to the detriment of the project, when they're trying to balance priorities, it becomes your job as the leader to help get everybody on the same page and resolve these conflicts. So I'm sure a lot of you have probably heard the story of the two chefs who were arguing over the lemon. There was one lemon left in the kitchen and they each insisted that they needed it. And they absolutely had to have it or their recipe would not work. And one thing a dictatorial leader might just say, fine, I'm going to cut it in half. You each get half. What happens? Neither one of them is happy because neither one of them has enough to do their recipe. But if you talk to the two of them, what you find out is that one of them wants the juice and one of them wants the peel. So if you can actually give them each exactly what they want and make everybody happy. So it's up to the leader to talk to them, to find out what's going on, find out what the people really want, and then ideally come up with a solution that's going to make everybody happy. Okay. And scientists are really good at this. Okay, critical thinking, problem solving. These are some of the skills that we really excel at. We're very good at making, doing an analysis, looking at the data, researching our decisions and coming up with something, a rational solution to the problem. Part of your job as the leader is to remove obstacles that are in the way of your followers or your team members getting done what needs to be done, and especially empowering them to make decisions and implement solutions. So making sure that they understand what the end goal of the project is so that they can make decisions on their own and their appropriate decisions, and they don't have to come back to you for every little thing. Okay, so you're going to, as a leader, you're going to want to delegate. Which is a leadership skill all on its own. You're going to think about who you're going to delegate to and which kinds of tasks you're going to delegate. Some things lend themselves better to delegation than others. If you are going to delegate something to somebody, give them the parameters. This is what I would like you to do, and you can use these resources, and you can't use those resources. And this is what's been done before. This is why we're doing it. Let them know how they're doing and let them know that you appreciate what they're doing. Okay. One of the big reasons to be a leader is because you can get so much more done when you have other people helping you, but you need to let them know what to do, how they can do it, and what resources they can and can't use. You don't want to micromanage them. You want to give them the information that they need to go out and do it. Okay. Another piece you're going to have as the leader is integrity. And a lot of the research shows that this is actually one of the most important things to have in a leader. The people on your team want to know that they can trust you, that what you're telling them is truthful, that you're being honest. They may not like what you're saying, but if they at least believe it's honest and truthful and you're treating them with respect, they will treat you with respect. This is especially why, as I said earlier, people who come up through the ranks often get a lot of respect because they must know what they're talking about because they've been in this situation before. So I believe what they're saying. So I'm more willing to follow them. But integrity is one of the most important things that you have to have as a leader. And if you make a mistake, you need to be willing to admit that, take responsibility for it, and move on. Okay. As the leader, you are responsible for the results of the team. So it's important that you know what that end goal is, what that vision is, and you keep that in mind at all times. Where do I want this team to go? And you're getting them excited about it. And When they get bogged down in the details, you're reminding them of why we're doing this, why this is important, and getting them all excited about that bigger vision. Okay. As the leader, it's important that you know what you can do and what you can't do. You don't have to be excellent at everything. You probably can't be excellent at everything. So you need to know when you need to rely on other people. You can certainly continue to learn and grow and get better at things, but there will always be things that you don't enjoy or you're not good at, and you're going to have other people on your team who want to do that. A good example of this is there are some people who are really good at planning ahead and being prepared, and they plan everything in advance, think about every possible contingency. They're ready for whatever might happen. There are other people who are not good at planning, but are really good in the moment, and they can come up with, quick ideas on the fly. Okay, so where do you fall on that spectrum, and can you work with other people on your team who are good in the other way, so you balance each other out and you get everything done? So, what is it that you can do, and what is it you need to get other people to do? Okay. And then probably the last thing that we're going to talk about as far as one of the pieces of being a leader is coaching and mentoring. It's not only your job to get this vision accomplished, but a lot of times it's part of your responsibility as well to help develop the members of your team and to help them grow. So you may have responsibility for both coaching and mentoring. And again, these are, terms that are often confused, but they really are a little bit different. So coaching is usually shorter term. It's, listening, encouraging them, helping them make a plan to get done what needs to be done right now, and to move, maybe the next little step up. Mentoring is usually a longer term process. Usually there's a bigger differential between the two people. You're asking them leading questions to make them think about things, maybe providing resources, providing connections, but really helping them to discover things for themselves and learn how they want to grow and where they want to go. And sometimes you have to balance, because sometimes you'll find out that one of your team members really wants to grow or move in a direction that's not ideal for the team. So sometimes you have to balance what's best for the individual member versus what's best for the team. And again, ideally come up with something that is going to work for everybody. So when you put all these different pieces together, you come up with a leader that people want to follow. Somebody who has integrity, has enthusiasm, can help get the team working together and get everybody moving in the right direction. Okay, so this is who you want to be, is that leader that everybody's excited about working for and wants to work with you again. Okay, so how can you get experience in all these different skills? How can you, build up your resume or your CV, or find out if you even like doing these things? There's lots of things that you can do now that will let you find, get practice, get better at these things, and find out whether or not you like them. You want specific examples that you can put on a resume, but also talk about in an interview, and experiences you can use, on the job, because you never know when something's going to come up that needs to be done. Okay, so the first thing, the easy thing to do is read and listen and start thinking about these types of topics. This is, not something that a lot of times we're taught. It's something that you have to pick up on your own. So there's lots of free resources out there. Anybody familiar with TED Talks? These are short, usually 20-minute talks. There's a whole channel on leadership topics. So you can read these, learn about leadership, learn about how people think about it, how they exhibit it. Some of them you'll go, oh, that's a cool idea. I would love to try that. That sounds really interesting. Other ones you'll listen to and you'll go, well, that's the silliest thing I've ever heard. That would not work for what I'm doing. And that's fine. So the more you learn, the more you experience, the better off you will be. Some other places you can look, Harvard Business Review has lots of great articles as well. So there's lots of great resources out there in the business literature, lots of classes. a lot of them that you can audit online. One of the few benefits of the pandemic is there's lots of resources online now that we can take advantage of. So I would encourage you to explore those as much as possible. Okay. If you're still in school and you're looking at internships, co-ops, these kinds of things, a lot of these have an option for leadership training. And a lot of people don't take advantage of that. So consider that when you're looking at internships or co-ops. Is there leadership training involved in this particular position? And if it's not built into the program, are there opportunities at the organization? Can I go sit in on things? Okay. You can seek out other sorts of projects where you can get leadership experience. So there's lots of open source, for example, programming projects out there where you can volunteer for a little while, contribute code, maybe start running a discussion group or start helping to moderate a job board. So you can, again, build job skills, but also start showing leadership. And these are the kinds of things where it's really better to pick a couple of things that you're really excited about and stick with them for a longer period of time, because you build up your credibility, and you will move up in the leadership chain and get more and more responsibility, rather than jumping between a whole bunch of different things where you're always going to, kind of be at the beginning. So think about, what is it you might really want to do, for a while, where you can build up your leadership skills. Okay, some other examples: student government. Again, if you're still in school or you're working at an academic institution, can you get involved in student government and actually running the institution? Is there something about the institution that really bugs you that you would like to get changed? There are opportunities there to either get elected or get appointed to leadership positions and actually affect change in your institution. Okay. Volunteer, do community service, do service for your professional organization, do service at, an animal shelter. So again, as you volunteer over a longer period of time, you'll get more and more responsibilities. You may start supervising other people, instructing other people in how to do things. That's leadership experience. And it's a great way to get it, because as a volunteer, you're probably not going to get fired. You probably can't screw up too badly, but again, you can try it and see if you like it. So look for opportunities to help out. And finally, do you have, is there a hobby that you have? Is there something that you do outside of work? If so, there's probably other people that have that same hobby. So can you, join a group? Again, join a discussion group. Is there a group that meets on a regular basis? Or if not, can you start one? So maybe you collect stamps, maybe you garden, talk to other people who do that, start a group, start a project, get people together and lead them in doing something. And you'll start building these leadership skills, flexing those leadership muscles, and finding out if you enjoy this and if this is something that you're good at. Okay. There's lots of resources out there that can help you. So these are just a few of the books that are very useful, but there's lots of things out there. So explore, read, talk to other people about this as much as possible. And again, attend workshops and things like that. Those can be very helpful as well. Okay. So we want to thank the 4 organizations that sponsored this workshop today, and thank all of you for attending and listening through all this time. And we are now going to turn it over. I will let Liam introduce themselves, and we will turn it over to questions.
Hey folks, Liam here. I'm a part of the career network at AIP who helped produce this webinar. Very quickly before questions, we do have a number of good ones. Anyone heading out of the webinar, you will reach a survey screen. We ask that if you have any feedback, please give it to us. We want to put on more webinars like this, and the best way for us to do that is feedback from you all. Certain subjects that you want us to cover, have any suggestions, please, you can write as little or as much as you want. It really helps us produce more content like this, because we definitely want to host more webinars for next year. So let's get into, we have a number of good questions. So I wanted to just go in first with this one question regarding the quote that you used, Lisa.
Mhm.
The attendee asked, how would you express the first quote in terms of management? As in, a leader wants others to long for the sea, and what does a manager do or inspire or want? Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think the manager is really, the other half of it. So the leader is the one who's encouraging people to, oh, you want to get to the sea. The manager is the one who's like, okay, well, we're going to need to build a boat, and so we're going to need to get the wood, we're going to need to get the hammers. So they're the one who's really immersed in the details of what do we need to do to make that happen.
Right.
So they would kind of, be that first half. There's a great quote from, I believe it was JF Kennedy, who was taking a tour of NASA one time and talked to the janitor and asked the janitor what he was doing. And the janitor said, I'm helping send a man to the moon. Like, that was somebody who had a good leader, because they really felt part of that bigger vision. And
Right.
Every task is important. Everything needs to be done. And if you can inspire people like that, you will be able to achieve wonderful things.
All right. The next question concerns another take on leadership. Someone writes in, Brene Brown defines leadership as anyone who takes responsibility for finding the potential in people and processes, who has people and processes, and who has the courage to develop that potential. While increasing, quote unquote, yearning for the sea is important, how do you see the development of potential, as in expertise, interfacing with one's passion or desire for the end goal?
Oh my gosh, there's a lot in that question.
Yeah, trying to see what's best way to break it up. Let's see.
Yeah, well, and we kind of touched on it a little bit, because that is part of the leader's job, especially if it's a longer term team, is to develop the people that are on your team and to help them get where they want to go and explore their potential. So that that's part of your job, is getting to know them, getting to know what they want to do, and letting them try out different things.
Yeah. And then I think the last part of the question was, how do you see the potential of expertise interfacing with someone's passion or desire for this sort of affective end goal?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully they have the expertise to do what needs to be done. Or if they have the passion for the end goal, maybe they're at least willing to learn what needs to be done. It's frustrating for a lot of people when there's something that they really are excited about and want done, but they have no idea where to start and how to do it. So again, that becomes kind of the leader's job to, okay, or part of that coaching and mentoring. Okay, well, how would you do this? What would be the first step, and kind of lead them through it.
Right. So the next question that we have is a shorter one. One of the toughest tasks of a leader is in the environment of change. Do you have in changing environments, do you have a recommended leadership style?
I mean, there's a whole science of leading change. And that is not one that I am an expert on. And again, I mean, it's a hard question.
Depends on the scenario, I bet.
Yeah, I was going to say there's so many different parameters around that. I mean, there's always change going on, and it depends on what kind of change, if it's a wanted change, an unwanted change, if it's imposed from the outside, if it's something that the team is driving. Probably, that's when really, communication becomes especially important. So probably, you would not want to be dictatorial or, really even paternalistic. That's when probably more democratic, trying to get everybody involved in the decisions as much as possible. It may be, okay, we're going to have to deal with that our company just got bought, but here are the things that we get to decide about, and how do you guys want to do this? kind of empowering them to do what they can, even as they're dealing with something. I'm from the Midwest. Nobody here likes change. That's the stereotype.
I feel that. Most of my life, well, at this point, maybe not, but a large portion of my life, I lived in the Midwest. So I'm aware of that opinion as well. We had a quick question. Someone just asking, would you elaborate on what norming means?
Oh, okay. Norming as, forming, storming, norming, performing. So norming is, when things are going well, things are chugging along, kind of everybody knows what they're supposed to do, and you're getting towards your goal. So things are fine. They're not wonderful, but there's no real problems. Performing is kind of the next level when, everything is awesome. Everybody's happy. Everybody knows exactly what they're supposed to do, and they're happy doing it. And when there's a problem, they know how to solve it. So, norming is good and fine, but when you get a team that's really performing, it is just something exceptional.
Great. We did have a question come in that was answered by just the host. I did want to let people know this webinar again is being recorded, so you will be sent that recording at a later time. We will have to upload it, but everyone will be sent it as well. Let's see. So the next question we have is, when should leaders allow for anonymous feedback in case someone isn't comfortable with making a comment that they might think that would put them at risk? And then if a leader hasn't provided a mechanism for anonymous feedback, should we conclude they've considered it and decided against it?
No. I think a lot of leaders don't think about that. They feel like they're open and people should be able to come to them with anything. But I think that's an excellent point. There's a lot of times when you would like to make a comment anonymously, and there may not be a mechanism for that. I can't remember. I had an example of this recently where somebody was like, oh, just, provide feedback this way. I'm like, that's not going to be anonymous. You're going to know who it came from. They're like, oh, I didn't think about that it was identifiable. So we had to come up with something else. So I think if they haven't provided that mechanism, I always try to ascribe, to not ascribe malice. It's just, okay, they just didn't think about it. Depending again on what the institution is, there may be, another way to provide that feedback anonymously. So if it's a company, maybe you can provide the feedback to HR, who could then give it to the person, or even tell HR, hey, can you implement a mechanism where we can give this person feedback anonymously?
Sure. And then just a quick follow-up, can you think of any examples where, or times when leaders should not allow for anonymous feedback?
I can't think of a time where you wouldn't allow it. I mean, sometimes you might, it can be frustrating as a leader if you get, some feedback and you're like, oh, I want to act on this. I want to, fix this problem, but I can't because I don't know who's having it. A lot of times if somebody's going to go to all that trouble, there's maybe more than one person on the team that's going to have it. So it may be an issue that you want to bring up with the team overall. I think the only time that I would really not allow it at all is if the team had really deteriorated and all you were getting was, really horrible negative comments. Then you're like, look, let's stop. Let's have an open discussion and clear the air.
Sounds like there's a problem outside of some other stuff.
There's a bigger problem, and let's deal with it and then, move on.
Sure.
Which is, having difficult conversations, which is a whole nother topic.
Right. We have a question that mentioned, you talked about being rational, not emotional in decision-making process, although there is growing support for compassionate leadership. What are some ways to balance rational and compassionate leadership?
Again, it's so situational. So, and I usually think about, rational as, looking at the task, the order of tasks, who's going to be assigned to do what, or who's going to be asked to do what. Because anybody who's tried to lead people knows that you can ask them to do things. You can't make anybody do anything. Doesn't matter if you're paying them or not.
Sure. They have to do it, take it upon themselves at some
Right,
point.
they have to do it, and you're much better off if it's something that they want to do, or they're at least willing to put up with it for a little while. And I lost the second half of it. It went off the screen. So,
Oh, it was
compassion.
right, balancing
Yeah.
rational and compassionate leadership.
Yeah, and again, that comes down to knowing the team members, to knowing what their values are, knowing what's important to them, and making sure that, you know, their assignments are, or the things that you're asking of them are in line with that as well. And sometimes you may give something to one person when you know somebody else would do it better, but maybe this person needs practice at that, or they need something easy at this time, or there's something else going on. And that's probably one of the hardest things about leadership, is there's so many variables that you're trying to balance at the same time. There's no one right solution. So all you can do is make the best decisions you can with the information you have at the time, and, you know, hope it works out.
Sure.
And then deal with the consequences, you know, when you get to the next step.
Right. We have another really good question that asks, can you unravel quote unquote trustworthiness and honesty? In other words, trustworthiness may be compromised if I admit that I don't know what is the next best step. We have seen many examples where leaders are dishonest about their level of confusion, and that doesn't seem wise.
Yeah. Gosh, we don't have any examples of this lately. So, I mean, honest, it has to be, you know, I'm always going to tell you the truth, but I may be honest and say, you know, I can't tell you this now.
Mm-hmm.
Or, you know, you may have to say, you know, I don't know now, or we're collecting more data, or that thing. You want the people on your team to trust that you're doing the best for them. So even if you're not telling them now, that there's a reason that you're not telling them now, if that makes sense. So you certainly never, you know, you never want to lie to them or tell them anything that's untrue. And you know, I'm a scientist. I don't mind when people say, you know what, that's a really good question. I don't know the answer. Let me research it and find out. But there's a lot of people that don't like to admit that. They think it makes them look weak.
Right.
So I think you can do that, you know, occasionally. You can't do it all the time.
Sure. The next question we have is, when your leader is like a manager instead of a leader, what can we do as a team member? For example, a leader teams up with a new staff member and tries to fire a senior team member. As new staff, what would you recommend to do in this situation?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So yeah, that is a team that is storming. So the leader is teaming up with a new staff member and trying to fire a senior member. Well, the first question would be, you know, does the leader have the authority to do that? Is, you know, is there a reason this senior team member needs to be fired? Mm-hmm. Normally, if a leader is acting like a manager, somebody else will step in and fill the gap, and you'll notice that the team members start looking to somebody else for
Mm-hmm.
that leadership and for that direction if they're not getting it from the person that they should. If somebody in the team is like trying to overstep their authority and take that position, you know, take that responsibility and fire people when they don't have that responsibility, the team members can support that person and maybe, you know, go to, you know, can you go to the next higher level?
Sure.
Or provide counter examples. If the leader is saying, well, this person needs to be fired because of this, that, and the other, you know, can you provide counter examples? Well, no, that's really not what happened. And kind of support the team member.
That makes sense. We had two folks requesting, would you mind going back to the slides with the recommended reading?
Oh, yes.
Just so they can take a look.
No problem. I just like the picture.
Oh yeah, no, it's a lovely picture.
Come on. There we go.
All right. And then we have a question that came in that asks, do you have any suggestions when a leader has toxic team members or vice versa?
Or a toxic leader?
I guess this is kind of connected to some of what we've talked about.
Yeah. And that's a problem, although I probably shouldn't admit it, but I have been on some teams where the leader was just not a good person. A toxic leader. And in some ways that's a team bonding experience because it became an us against them situation. It's like, okay, we're going to do this just to show them that we can. So it can be a bonding experience for the team. It doesn't make for a good working environment. And usually what happens is, the people start leaving. Ideally, you would, again, can you bring that up to the higher management that, this person is the problem and can they be replaced or moved to a different position? But if everybody on the team agrees, then that would be, one of those times when is there somewhere else in the organization that you can go to get this person moved or, removed.
Sure. We did have a question that I'm going to try and, there is a question that says, I am a project manager / mentor, and I found some team members are more motivated and it's easier to mentor / lead them, but for others, they are more passive or less motivated. Are these characteristics changeable or improvable? I found it's associated with each individual's experience, education, and seems like, their own kind of nature. Is there anything I can do there? Thanks.
I mean, part of it is just built-in personality. Some people are more self-motivated. I'm not sure if it's politically correct to say that some of it has to do with, your experiences and the time in which you grew up. Because I know, like, during my formative years, there were a lot of people out there. And so there was a lot of competition for things like jobs and scholarships. So a lot of the people of my age tend to be much more competitive because we had to be. Whereas people who grew up maybe when there wasn't as much competition, they didn't have to be as, go get it. They were a little bit more relaxed about things. So a lot of it is innate. I think you can try to point out to them that, times have changed, and these days, you need to be looking out for yourself, for your career, getting these skills for yourself. Nobody else is going to hand things to you. So, maybe pointing out specific examples of things that they can do and trying to, set deadlines to kind of help motivate them to do some of those things that they should be doing on their own can be helpful. And if they start seeing small wins, that will motivate them to do more.
That makes sense. So I think we have time for probably about 2 more questions. So I saw this one and I do think it's a good just topic to discuss. One of the difficult tasks of being a leader or manager is giving negative feedback. How can they do this in a constructive way?
Oh, we're back to the having difficult conversations. And the traditional advice has been to do the sandwich. So to, say something positive and then the negative and then the something positive. And what I've been reading recently is that's really not the best way to do it. You obviously, want to set up a time to talk to the person, ahead of time, say, I need to talk to you about something. Let's set up a time where we're not going to be interrupted. Give them the background, give them, the difficult feedback, and then give them, positive things that they can do or ways that they can turn it around. And then make sure to follow up, because probably what's going to happen is whenever you get negative feedback about yourself, the first thing you do is, oh no, that's not true. And then when you kind of think about it for a day or two, well, okay, maybe there's a grain of truth to it. So it can take a while for the person to accept that. So by following up a little bit later, hey, do you think about what we talked about? Do you think you're ready to try whatever we were going to do to make this more positive? and help them, along that way. But yeah, giving negative feedback and having those difficult conversations is never fun. And
Right.
the longer you put it off, the worse it gets.
Yeah. To me, it feels like it's both giving and receiving are kind of their own art form in a way. So I think we have time for one more question. I did want to bring up, let's see. There's one question that I think has value, or I'm curious about the answer as well. Do you have any pointers for situations where senior management does not see the value in team building or other intangible activities?
My best pointer would be, if senior management isn't providing it, then just do it yourself. You can do things to get to know the other people on your team. You don't have to have big formal fancy retreats or anything. You can just do simple small conversations. You can chat with people on the side during Zoom calls. Find things that you have in common. Eventually we'll be able to start going out to coffees or things like that. So I think if management is not providing those sorts of opportunities, then the members of the team can just start doing them themselves. Because it really is so much better if you know the people on your team. You don't have to be best friends and do everything together, but if you know what they like, a little bit about their personal lives, maybe you're a little bit more understanding when they're not quite on their game. You're like, oh well, that's because something's going on. So it really helps the whole team if you kind of know each other a little bit better.
That makes
So,
sense.
and just being interested in other people. Everybody's got something interesting about them. It just may take a little while to find it. So you can use that as a game as well. Okay, I'm going to find something interesting about you if it takes me a week.
That's good advice. All right, so it looks like it's just after 2 my time. That is all the time we have for questions right now. I did want to remind folks after the end of this webinar, you will be directed to a survey page. If you don't have time to do it now, you will also be emailed it. And then once we have this recording process, you will be sent the recorded version as well for your viewing pleasure. We want to thank the organizations that made this webinar possible, AIP, or the American Institute of Physics, and Physics Today, the Society of Physics Students and Sigma Pi Sigma, the American Association of Physicists in Medicine, and the American Association of Physics Teachers. I don't know if you had any other words to say, Lisa. We really appreciate you hosting this webinar and being able to provide this service to our audience.
Oh, no problem. It was fun. You guys have really good thought-provoking questions. So thank you for that. And thank you, Liam, for monitoring them all.
Yeah, no problem. It's my pleasure. Like I said earlier, folks, if you have any suggestions for the survey, the best way to see content that you want to see is just to write in there. You don't have to put a ton of feedback, but if there are certain subjects you want us to cover, let us know. We are in the process of planning things for next year in the future, and your input is really the best way for us to decide what we do next.